I'm Donna Lowry, host of Lawmakers on Georgia Public Broadcasting. Welcome to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young debate series from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting. This is the Republican runoff debate for Congressional District 3. Drew Ferguson currently represents the district, but he is not running for re-election, so this is an open seat. Let's meet the candidates. They are, in alphabetical order, Mike Dugan. Spent more than 20 years in the Army, was an Army Ranger and Master Paratrooper. And Brian Jack is a senior advisor to former President Donald Trump. Now let's meet our panelists. Emily Wu Pearson is a reporter and host for WABE in Atlanta, and Chuck Williams is a reporter for WRBL in Columbus, Georgia. For complete rules on today's program, please visit the Atlanta Press Club website, atlantapressclub.org. To start the debate, each candidate will be asked 2 questions by the panel. Candidates have 60 seconds to answer their questions. Emily Wu Pearson, you get the first question to Brian Jack.
Mr. Jack, during your time working for former President Trump, there was a large focus on deregulation, and that's been important to your campaign as well. Can you speak a little bit about specific regulation that you would work to eliminate and why that regulation doesn't serve the American public?
Well, thank you very much. And first and foremost, thank you all for tuning in. A few months ago, Mike and I were on stage with 5 different opponents for this congressional seat, and we're now in a runoff election. I was proud to earn 33,000 votes from the voters in our congressional district. I appreciate your confidence and your support. And to answer your question, I do talk a lot about my experience working for President Trump in the White House. And as it relates to deregulation, one of the things that we did in 2016 while campaigning across the country is we said, we're going to cut, for every new regulation put on the books, we're going to cut 2 existing regulations. How did we do? What was our scorecard at the end of the administration? For every regulation that was put on the books, we cut 8 existing regulations. I think there's some great ideas that have been floated out there. One of our former opponents talked about what's called the REINS Act, trying to ensure that Congress is responsible for mandating any regulations over a certain threshold. But ultimately, I'd love to see more deregulation that can unleash America's economic potential.
Thank you very much. Chuck Williams, please ask your first question of Mike Dugan.
Senator, you finished 22 points behind Mr. Jack in the May primary. Your opponent has been endorsed, as he just said, by former President Trump. Your opponent also has a fundraising advantage. How do you overcome these obstacles in a 4-week runoff?
Thank you for that question. First of all, thanks for having us here today. As you heard, I am a former Army Ranger, so that doesn't really bother me that much. I've been down worse than this before. In my first race, I was down by a larger number and came back and won by 10 points. What I will remind everybody is it's 0-0 right now, and we're going into this with a clean slate. Now, I do have a little fundraising disadvantage in number-wise because 80% of my contributions have come from the state. I'm not going outside the state heavily to have somebody else from outside the state fund my campaign. I think it's important if we're going to represent the 3rd Congressional District that the funding comes from support within the 3rd Congressional District.
Thank you very much. Emily, it is your turn for a question to Mike Dugan.
Senator, while you were working in the State House, you worked on several Georgia-specific ways to regulate immigration. If elected into Congress, the picture gets much bigger in what you could do. What would be your priority immigration legislation for the country?
I think it's a 2-part deal. First, before we do any immigration reform, we have to shut down the border. The border situation right now, it's a local public safety issue. It's a humanitarian issue. It's a national security issue. Until we shut that down with federal government working in coordination with the states, not in opposition to, we can't really discuss immigration reform. Once that border is shut down, then we do need to take a long, hard look at immigration reform because we need new people coming into the country. We need skill sets that we don't have readily available in the numbers that we need here in the U.S. So that it's a 2-part deal. And you can't do both of them at the same time.
All right, Chuck, you get the final question to Brian Jack.
Mr. Jack, you've been endorsed by former President Trump. You spent much of your career working for him. If the former president is unsuccessful in his bid to return to the White House and the Republicans lose the narrow majority in the U.S. House, how will you work with a potential Democratic House leader and President Biden if he's reelected?
Well, I have great confidence in President Trump's ability to get elected this fall. I think what we saw just 10 days ago in Manhattan play out in a Democrat stronghold, convicting President Trump erroneously is something that I think will turbocharge turnout for him this November. And you saw it with the contributions that he raised in just a few days after, $54 million, 30% of which were from new contributors that have never given before. So I have every expectation that we will have an incredibly successful November, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that not only do we win our congressional district, but that we send him back to the White House. As it relates to the priorities that we have going forward, President Trump's somebody who can work with a lot of different people. I was proud to be his congressional liaison, somebody that worked for him to ensure that we were able to deliver tax cuts for the people of Georgia, deliver a secure border, deliver all the accomplishments we had over the course of his administration. We were able to do so through really strong legislation, and I was proud to play a key role in that administration.
All right, thank you very much. Well, that concludes the first round. The candidates will now ask a question to each other. The candidate who asks the question will have 30 seconds for a rebuttal. Mike Dugan, you get the first question for your opponent.
Thank you, Brian. We've been all over this district together over the last few months, and you know, you've heard me go on and on about my military experience and my legislative experience as the majority leader in the state Senate, and I've heard you talk extensively about the 8 straight years that you've been with President Trump. But campaign finance records and your own CV say differently. From 2021 to 2023, you were not with Trump and you were not in the district. What were you doing?
Well, I'm proud, as you've noted, for those 4 years from the first to last day of President Trump's administration, I worked in the White House by his side. It was an accomplishment. Many of my colleagues did not last that entire time, but I was proud to work by his side for those 4 years. And after the administration ended, President Trump, myself, and Kevin McCarthy sat down and we decided that the most important thing we could do during the 22 election cycle was to fire Nancy Pelosi. And I will never apologize for firing Nancy Pelosi. And on day one of President Trump's re-election campaign in November of 2022, I was named one of his top 3 advisors, and we crisscrossed our state, crisscrossed the country to ensure that we could put President Trump in the place that he is today as the Republican nominee for president and as the 47th president of the United States.
All right, thank you. Mike Dugan, rebuttal.
Thank you. Unfortunately, the red wave that we were all hoping for at that time did not come to fruition. And I appreciate you mentioning former Speaker McCarthy at that time, because that kind of explains why 97.4% of your contributions have come from outside of district, 55% have come from special interest groups and PACs. This sounds a lot to me like the same old DC politics of DC money trying to come in and sway a local election.
Thank you very much. Brian Jack, it's your turn to ask a question.
Well, I appreciate that. And you often do, Senator Dugan, talk about your legislative record. And as the viewers are watching, when you're thinking about going to the beach this summer, traveling to see your neighbors, or traveling with your neighbors to go on vacation, more often than not, you're going to be frustrated by the gas prices that you see over and over again. Gas prices continue to rise. We saw that certainly in 2021 when Joe Biden enacted his disastrous economic policy. So my question is, as it relates to your legislative record, have you ever voted to raise the gas tax?
Thank you. In 2013, HB 170 came across, and it consolidated different forms of taxes into one unified code. And the first thing that happened after that was the price of gas went down. Also, since that time, as the majority leader, I've cut your state income taxes 3 times, including the largest income tax in state history. In Georgia, while I was in the Senate, we got rid of the state portion of the property tax. When I was in the Senate, we got rid of the death tax in Georgia. So we have made massive cuts. But one of the other things that we did was we returned $2 billion of excess funds to the taxpayers. So I'm pretty proud of my tax record of reducing the tax burden on Georgians and make us the most tax-friendly state in the nation.
Brian Jack, rebuttal.
Well, ultimately, that 2015 vote to raise the gas prices, or raise the gas tax 6 cents a gallon, represented the largest tax increase in the history of Georgia. And as I've noted before, I do talk about my record with President Trump a lot because I think that's a record that worked for our congressional district. And I was very proud to be one of his point folks working with Congress to pass the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. Our next Congress is going to have to grapple with many of those provisions sunsetting. I would be proud as your next congressman to work alongside President Trump and for our district to cut taxes and ensure we have prosperity going forward.
All right, thank you very much. That concludes our second round. You are watching the runoff debate for Congressional District 3. We'll now go back to the panel to ask questions to each of the candidates of their choice until we run out of time. As a point of moderator privilege, I may also ask questions of the candidates, and I will determine when a rebuttal is appropriate. And I'm going to use that moderator privilege right away. I'm going to ask about partisan gridlock. Brian Jack, partisan gridlock in Washington frustrates many people as it prevents meaningful progress. It was an issue during your time in the Trump administration, and it continues under the Biden administration. There's a high likelihood that it will persist after the November election. What steps would you take to avoid the same inefficiency?
Well, I think we had one of the most successful administrations in recent history, and we did that in both a Republican House and a Democrat House. But I would also say, just speaking to who I am as a person and how I try to conduct myself, if you look at, again, how this race has unfolded, of the folks that didn't make the second round, our fellow opponents in the first round, they endorsed me. We may have had disagreements in the first round, but they certainly rallied around my candidacy. Mike Crane and Philip Singleton endorsed me. I think that shows an ability to work across a different spectrum to ensure that you can do what's necessary for our congressional district. And I'm proud to have played such a key role in President Trump's administration, working with both that Republican House and working to notch policy wins in the Democrat House as we achieved back in 2017 to 2021.
Thank you very much. On that same topic, Mike Dugan, if elected, you will face a different and distinct challenge. You served as a leader in a Republican-controlled General Assembly, and any policies during your time went very smoothly. How do you plan to deal with the partisan gridlock that prevents things from moving in Washington, though?
Well, they didn't go smoothly by accident. They went smoothly because of the leadership, the experience that I brought to the table within the Senate. You have to treat people with respect and fairly. There's an honesty factor that we have lost in politics. We have gotten more to making headlines than we have to actually working and resolving problems. One of the things that I've always been proud of is, even as majority leader, it was important for me to not only pass meaningful legislation, but to get everybody else involved in the process, to have their voices heard, and to get a consensus moving forward where we had a majority of a majority with every issue that we brought to the floor before we ever brought it to the floor. That's not just solely in politics. That's in the construction industry, which I was in for 16 years, and in the military, which I was in for 20 years.
All right, thank you very much. Chuck Williams, your question.
I'd like to ask this to both candidates, but I'll start it with Mr. Jack. In 2019, Congressman Drew Ferguson, the man both of you want to replace, and Democrat Sanford Bishop joined forces to pressure HUD to stop funding a substandard Section 8 housing complex in downtown Columbus. People were living in squalor. One man died as a result of those conditions. Will you work with Democrats, including the 2 U.S. senators, to address critical community issues?
Well, I'm grateful for that question, and one of the things that I'm hopeful for is in Columbus, obviously an area you know very well, there's a really good opportunity going forward to invite the semiconductor industry to move in. You see this Chips for Chips initiative, United Way's doing incredible stuff in the Columbus metropolitan area, and I think in that vein, we should do everything we possibly can to ensure that we have policies, that Congress enacts policies that enables business to thrive throughout our state. That industry itself, what the community in Columbus is trying to do, they're rallying around each other to ensure that they can invite the semiconductor industry to come into the district, and they've got a great workforce. You've got a lot of Army veterans there that want to do what they can. You've got Columbus State University. You've got great supply chain connections with the Atlanta airport not too far away. That's exactly the type of issue that I would want to help advance and advocate for if elected to Congress, and I'm very proud of the work that some of our fellow citizens are doing in that community to try to make their community better for generations to come.
Thank you. Mike Dugan?
Yeah, I am unashamedly conservative. There's never been a question about that. But that does not mean that you disregard other people that were elected by the same number of people that you represent in your districts. I also understand that as an elected official, you don't solely represent Republicans or Democrats or Libertarians or Independents. You represent all of them. I've also learned through experience, and you'll hear me talk about that a pretty good bit, that I don't always have all the answers. And it's some of the best decisions we've ever made is listening to people from all sides of an issue, coming together and creating something that actually is better than any one of us could do by ourselves. We've got a great history of working across the aisle and working, honestly, across factions within the respective parties. So I don't think that'll change going to Washington.
All right, thank you very much. Emily.
I have another question for the both of you. I'll start with Senator Dugan. Student loan debt has been a really hot button issue lately. I'm wondering if you could describe what you see the role of the federal government is in helping people manage student loan debt.
First of all, nobody is forced to take a student loan. I know that sounds callous, but they're not forced to. So when we're looking at student loan forgiveness across the board, you're forgiving it to that one person, but you're putting that burden on everybody else. You know, our children have gone to college. We have to deal with it as a family. One of the things I would like to take into consideration is we kind of start limiting the amount of student loans you can give a student, because right now they can get 3 times what the tuition load is for student loans, and they're doing it by agencies that, even if you go bankrupt, are not covered by that. So what I would like to look at the federal level is, should we start including the ability to use this in a bankruptcy decision instead of the way it's set up right now?
All right. Brian Jack on student loan debt.
Yeah, I agree with Mike's concerns. And I think one of the things that I also find very concerning is I fully expect this October to see Democrats forgive student loans right before the election, because invariably they're going to try to do everything they can to win in November. So I think going forward, too, I think we should look at the role the Department of Education and generally the education system plays at the federal level. We should do everything we can to remove the federal government outside of the business of education. I trust local communities as it relates to educational needs within the communities. And certainly, Mike and I have both experienced, but in Coweta, we've got a college and career academy, an incredible facility that started. 53 facilities across the state popped up trying to do everything they could to advance college and career education at that most local level. If you're in high school and you're going to school in Coweta County Public Schools, you've got a chance to learn trades, learn skills to make you incredibly employable thereafter for this dynamic and changing workforce. We should do everything we can to drive educational decisions back into the communities.
All right, thank you. Chuck.
This is for both gentlemen again, and I'll start this one with Senator Dugan. Over his tenure, Congressman Ferguson has avoided the national spotlight. Others in the Georgia delegation, including Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, have sought that spotlight. Which approach will you take?
I think that's pretty obvious. Judging from my last 11 years in the state Senate, my goal is to get stuff done. My goal is not to go up and be a TV star. If I want to do that, I'd move to Columbus and work for you over there. But it is important that we get people that put their heads down, go to work, and actually achieve something for the people that they're representing. It is okay to be loud. That's just not that's not how I operate.
Mike Dugan, your approach.
Brian, yeah.
Okay,
Brian Jack.
I'll do it
Brian
again.
Jack, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Well, Mike and I are certainly in alignment here. I think we've conducted ourselves on the campaign trail that very way. I talk a lot about my experience working with President Trump over the last 8 years, but you rarely, if ever, saw my name in the headlines because I put my head down to try to do the job of the American people. Very proud to do that, although I can offer some levity. When I first announced my campaign for Congress, I had to get my name out there a little bit because invariably people were unfamiliar with the work I did for him over those 8 years. But ultimately, I certainly agree with the approach of putting your head down, trying to do what's right for the American people, try to do what's right for our district, coming back to the district to defend the decisions that you make. I've talked about this a lot. I love the notion of town halls in each and every one of our counties before major votes. Let's get the community engaged, let's get the community active, and let's do everything we can to put our head down and represent the people of the 3rd District well.
All right, Emily, your next question.
I have another question for the both of you gentlemen. I'll start with Mr. Jack. Should we support Ukraine with U.S.-made weapons as the Biden administration has done, or would you rather see the U.S. withdraw funding and support?
Well, I think I'd first and foremost rather see, and I think the people of our congressional district would rather see funding, as we were sending a lot of money overseas, they'd rather see funding go to our southern border to secure our southern border. We don't talk about the southern border enough in my mind. We should talk about it more to see all the things that are happening and all the problems that we have with this porous, open border. There are estimates that over 17 million illegal immigrants live in our country, and to me, that equals 17 million Democrat votes for Joe Biden. It's very concerning and distressing to me, so I understand why, when we go around our district, we feel from constituents real concerns about money we send overseas. President Trump's offered some ideas like a Lend-Lease program, and likewise at the same time too, I think that the American defense industry certainly markets their weaponry. But I say that because we have to do everything we possibly can to use your tax dollars and be good stewards of your tax dollars. And when you see an open border, I understand why you, the voters of our congressional district, are concerned when we send money overseas.
Thank you. Mike Dugan.
So, same concept starting off. You know, like I said before, our number one priority is sealing the southern border. So we need to get that taken care of. When I was in Iraq, I can remember planes with pallets of cash coming in. I don't know what we got for that. I know there's no accountability of it. So no, I don't support that. And I was thankful that President Trump came in support of the Lend-Lease because he did it about a week after I started talking about it on the campaign trail. And it was not being received very well. For some reason after that, it started getting received better, so I appreciate it. But if you look at the Lend-Lease program that we did during World War II, after World War II, I think that's more of a model that we ought to have. It's not a cash dump. That's not sustainable. But if you do a loan of equipment with $1 with an anticipated reimbursement, I'm more comfortable with that.
Chuck, one quick question.
This will go to both of you very quickly. What is the most important economic engine in the 3rd District? Why, and what is your plan to continue to support that engine?
30 each.
You start, Mr. Jack.
Well, I think first and foremost, one of the things I'm really excited about is the generation coming up within our district. The workforce is wholly dependent on the success going forward. And as I noted before, very proud of what you see in Coweta and all across our district. We've got great educational opportunities to ensure our students, our next generation and the generations to come, are well prepared and well equipped to earn the jobs of the future. But at the same time, too, I think we're also very excited about all the business development coming into the district. Remington coming into Troup County, as I mentioned before, the opportunity with semiconductor industry. Ultimately, we've got to unleash America's energy and economic potential. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Dugan, 30 seconds.
The most important economic thing is the job that you're working in. So that's, if you're looking at one of the constituents within the 3rd District, if they're manufacturing industrial, that's the most important thing. If they're in health, that's the most important thing. But one of the largest sectors within the 3rd District is actually agriculture. 3rd District has the highest percentage of cattle production in the state. It's in the top 5 in poultry production and in hay. So we need to focus on what we think of brick and mortar manufacturing industrial, but without forgetting that agriculture is still a key part of the 3rd Congressional District.
All right. Thank you both very much. That is all the time we have for questions. The candidates will now have 60 seconds for a closing statement. Mike Dugan, you get the first closing statement.
Thanks again for y'all having us here today. To me, this is a clear choice. This is Georgia values versus, no offense, but a DC insider. This is picking somebody with leadership and experience, whose family lives in the district, whose children grew up in the district, went to school in the district, whose family goes to church in the district. This is not something that we should take lightly when we're picking who's going to represent us in DC. You can take a person that has admittedly been in the room and watched decisions be made, or you can pick a person who's been in the room and made those decisions and gone back to the voters that have elected them and explained why he did what he did. So I'm asking for your vote. Early voting ends on June 14th, and Election Day is on June 18th. And I would ask for you to vote for Mike Dugan.
All right, thank you very much. Brian Jack, it's your turn for a closing statement.
Well, thank you very much for welcoming us this evening, and thank you very much, too, for giving us the chance to share with you our vision and our ideals. I come to this race as a different type of candidate. I've never run for public office before. My experience rests over the last 8 years working alongside President Trump. That's one of the reasons President Trump endorsed me in this race, repeatedly has endorsed me in this race, because he knows that I'm somebody that puts my head down and does the job for the American people. I'm very proud, too, to have earned the support of Jim Jordan, Dr. Ben Carson, and as I noted before, some of the fellow opponents in the first round, Mike Crane, Philip Singleton, also have endorsed my campaign. But I'm also incredibly, incredibly grateful to the 33,000 voters within our congressional district that voted for me on May 21st. I'm doing everything I can to ensure we get the vote out. June 10th, early voting starts. June 14th, it concludes. Election Day is June 18th. And I certainly recognize that at the end of the day, you want to elect somebody that you believe in and that you think will come back to defend their decisions. I'm the guy for the job. My name is Brian Jack. Please go to brianjack.com to learn more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes our program. We'd like to remind voters that Election Day is June 18th. Please go to My Voter page on the Georgia Secretary of State's website to learn about early voting in your area. Our thanks to the candidates and to our panel of journalists. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club and Georgia Public Broadcasting for arranging today's program. For more information about the Atlanta Press Club debates, visit atlantapressclub.org. I'm Donna Lowry. Thanks for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series.